Awesome. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending today's online workshop. It's a shame we couldn't meet in person and get together, but it's great to be able to still present online today. My name's Zali Mahony from AUSVEG. I work as a biosecurity officer, and today I'll be taking you through the farm pest and disease risk pathway reduction presentation. So as Bonnie mentioned, we do just have a poll to run just to make today a little bit more interactive while we're all at home. And so those will pop up just like before in a little box with a question, and I'll let you know when to answer those. So cool, it's all working. So what is farm biosecurity? So it is a series of measures or practices that aid in protecting your production areas from many harmful pests and diseases that are not yet in your production area. So for example, that's insects like serpentine leaf miner that are not yet present in Victoria, and we'll hear about that a bit later today. So this on-farm biosecurity is really important for maintaining Australia's reputation of producing high quality products, which is really important for export. And these on-farm biosecurity measures, by protecting your farm from pests and diseases, can also act as security against farm quarantine measures and can be used as evidence when applying for pest-free place of production accreditations. So for example, fresh cucurbit growers, so that's pumpkin, squash, melons and cucumbers in Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria must now actually be an accredited cucumber green mottle mosaic virus pest-free place of production in order to trade with New Zealand. And as part of this accreditation, sound on-farm biosecurity measures must be demonstrated. So there are 6 main pathways by which pests and diseases can be spread onto your farm. And these include vehicles and equipment, staff and farm visitors, packaging bins and pallets, farm inputs, waste and weeds, and then wind. So now I'll just call to Maddie to pop up question 1 and 2 for the poll. Cool. And I'll let you, Maddie, if you could let me know when to keep going.
No worries. Just give that a few more seconds. Okay, and that one there. Thanks, Zali.
Thanks. Okay, cool. So I'll move on to the first pathway. So vehicles and equipment is the first pathway that I mentioned, and these are able to spread pests and diseases directly if uncleaned or contaminated. And the reason they represent a risk is because soil and plant material can collect in grills, tire treads, and on wheel rims. And a lot of pests and diseases can actually remain alive on these surfaces without a host plant for quite long periods of time. So good farm, vehicle, and equipment hygiene is, oh, so sorry. The joys of Zoom. Okay, sorry. So good vehicle and equipment hygiene is really important and allows you to reduce the risks of spreading any contamination onto your properties and into production areas. So commonly soil-borne diseases like fusarium wilt are spread through unwashed vehicles. Viruses that are mechanically spread through contact, like Tabama viruses, are also commonly spread through this pathway. So first of all, you can reduce the risks of vehicles and equipment by having one main farm gate entrance. So this is going to allow you to direct traffic and keep track of who's entering your property. It also limits the amount of movement of non-farm vehicles into production areas, which is again going to reduce those risks of introducing any new pests or diseases. Next, cleaning vehicles and equipment before they enter production areas can also significantly lower these risks. And this can be as simple as washing harvesting tools between paddocks up to providing vehicle and equipment wash down bays, like you can see in the image. And an alternative to this is actually getting all visitor or staff vehicles to remain outside the farm gate and only designated farm vehicles used in production areas. So where possible, restrict the movement by providing parking areas for those non-farm vehicles and use established vehicle paths when driving through production areas. Like you can see in the back of that image there, that's an established path. There's no plants around and it's quite a way distance from any crops. So that's going to limit the spread of pests and diseases through that pathway. So the second major pathway is staff and visitors. So pretty much if it can move, it can carry pests and diseases onto your farm. They can hitchhike on clothing, hands and shoes, and it's practically impossible to know if you've walked through a paddock and brushed past a plant that's got a fungal disease and you're now carrying those fungal spores on your clothes or your shoes. So it's really important to manage this pathway appropriately. And through this pathway, soil is a major form of spread. Soil on unwashed shoes or clothes can spread soil pathogens like fusarium wilt and root knot nematodes. Similarly, weeds like pigweed, like in the image on the screen, have small seeds that can actually be transported between paddocks in soil stuck on boots. And another example is viruses and fungi, often transmitted via contaminated clothing because they're quite contagious and spread through contact. So the good news is though that you can manage this pathway. So first, having a biosecurity gate sign lets you inform visitors and staff that there are biosecurity measures in place and lets visitors know who to contact if they want to enter the farm. And just a bit of a plug here, if you don't have any biosecurity signs on your property and you'd like some, please get in contact with myself or Bonnie and we should be able to provide you with 2 free signs. Next is because staff do represent a significant risk to spreading pests and diseases, they should be aware of these 6 pathways that we're talking about today and what measures that they should be taking to reduce those risks. So one really simple way can be by providing a foot bath with disinfectant upon the entry and exit of your farm. And you can see in those images, it doesn't need to be anything too flash. This one's just a few buckets and scrubbing brushes to clean the soil off the shoes. And for disinfectants, this is taken from the resource on the slide, but these are some suitable examples of disinfectant options, with the most accessible one being household bleach, but the others are available to purchase online or potentially through your agronomists. So, and lastly, having a visitor sign in register is a really great idea as it allows you to keep track of who's entering your property and communicate any biosecurity expectations you have of visitors, and also helps you conform to health and safety laws. So I mean, we've all seen how effective this is with tracing COVID outbreaks through Q&R codes, and you know, it's the same idea, but you'd just be tracing back any pest and disease outbreaks. So I'll just throw to Maddie again for question 4 for the poll. Thank you.
I'll just give it 20 more seconds. All right, well done, thanks.
Thanks. Right, so our next pathway is packaging bins and pallets. So this is the third pathway through which pests and diseases can be spread onto farm. And this is because they're often reused within the supply chain to store or transport produce. And that means that they can potentially carry pests and diseases that are not yet present in your production area. So it's really important to implement proper hygiene practices before using them yourself. And some examples here include insects. So a lot of things that lay eggs on leaves or on packaging material can be spread through this pathway. Thrips are a really small pest that can go kind of unnoticed and hide in crevices, and viruses as well, because they're highly contagious through contact. So to manage this pathway, any cardboard or other packaging material that can't be reused should not be reused, basically, because you're not able to to clean it properly. And reusable packaging should be cleaned and sanitized before using. And so that includes cleaning pallets of any soil or plant material before you use it yourself. Reusable packaging and bins should be stored appropriately on a clean, hard surface, whether that's gravel or concrete or the likes, preferably in a covered area where possible. That also includes dirty pallets shouldn't be stored near growing areas, and all these things are going to reduce transmitting any diseases or pests through this pathway. So I'll just go question 5 for the poll, Maddie, please. Thank you.
All right, that one's done, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so waste and weeds is the next major pathway. So both waste and weeds serve as breeding grounds for pests and diseases, as they can conceal them and harbour them, and that can lead to quite high infestation levels. And we all know weeds represent their own risk. Weeds represent their own risk by competing for valuable resources, but they also can act as alternative hosts for many plant pests and diseases. So by controlling this pathway appropriately, you'll be able to break the life cycle of pests and diseases. So again, the good news is that you can manage this pathway. So by making sure you're cleaning up and appropriately disposing of any waste from crops, whether that's through burial, burning, or composting, and also implementing a weed management plan is going to allow you to break the life cycle of pests and diseases that are living in the weeds and the waste and spreading to crops each season. And I'll just go question 6, please, Maddie. Thank you.
Right, that's done. Thanks, Zali.
Thanks. Great. So next pathway is farm inputs. So pests and diseases can be spread by anything new moving onto your property, whether that's fertilizer, compost, plastic mulch, seedlings, and seed and other planting inputs. So a few examples here is leaf miners and thrips that are really easily concealed in seedlings. And there's also a lot of diseases and viruses that are spread through planting inputs. So, and often these seeds and seedlings won't actually show any disease symptoms until the environment is suitable for the disease. So really important to manage this pathway when buying new plants or any propagation material. Make sure you're sourcing those planting materials from a reputable or certified supplier. And when receiving the farm inputs, if you can, try and inspect a sample upon their arrival for the presence of any insect feeding or disease symptoms, anything suspicious. And yeah, if you can, isolate that plant material away from healthy plants or your production areas just to confirm that they are pest and disease free. That's going to significantly reduce the risks of this pathway. And lastly, by maintaining your records of all your farm inputs and the sources of those is going to allow you to trace back any pest or disease outbreak. If that is to occur, you know where it's come from. And so I just throw to question 7. Maddie, please. Thank you.
That was a nice and quick one. Thanks, Zali.
Thanks, Maddie. All right, so we'll move on to the last pathway, which is wind. And you might be thinking, you know, how on earth can I control this when it's a natural pathway? Good news is you can through routine crop monitoring, which gives you the best chance at catching a new pest or disease early before it becomes established. So by increasing your chances of detecting a new pest or disease through crop monitoring, it's going to allow you to manage the pathway. And a really good example here is fall armyworm. It is a good flyer, but its spread can be extended by traveling on wind currents. So effective management does rely on good timing of any control, and especially because we, you know, haven't seen the full impact of it yet in Victoria, whereas we have up in Queensland and New South Wales, you'll be able to detect it early if you're out there monitoring regularly. So the key to managing wind as a pathway, as I said, regular crop monitoring for pests and diseases. That is both in crop and surrounding vegetation, so your weeds as well. Next, using yellow sticky traps or other pheromone or lure traps is an effective method of giving you a good measure of what good and bad bugs are present in your crops, and can also, again, aid in the early detection of new pests. And lastly, ensure staff are trained of pests and diseases of concern, which will increase your chances of detecting any new pests or diseases early. And I'll throw to question 8 and 9.
Thanks, Zali.
Thanks, Maddie. I might also just throw back to question 1, as I realised I missed that one at the start of the presentation, if possible.
Is that the vehicles and equipment?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Let's go
Perfect. And it's quite a long one, but while that's popped up on the screen, that's the end of my presentation. And yeah, if you have any questions or would like some more information on anything, please, yeah, ask them now or feel free to get into contact after the workshop.